In 2015, Warner Bros. Animation released Justice League: Gods and Monsters, a bold reinvention of the Justice League. It took place in a universe with familiar characters reimagined in darker, unexpected ways. The heroes are flawed, alliances are fragile, and morality is never black and white. There, Wonder Woman, Superman and Batman are survivors shaped by trauma and inhabit a world that is as complicated and terrifying as our own. It's a universe that asks what happens when the people meant to protect us are flawed, desperate, and haunted as the world they try to save. And nowhere is this more clear than in their version of Wonder Woman, Bekka of New Genesis. But before I get to their version of Wonder Woman, it helps to look at her comic book counterpart, a relatively obscure figure from Jack Kirby's Fourth World saga. Bekka first appeared in the Hunger Dogs graphic novel in 1985. She wasn't really a significant character, the humble daughter of Hyman, the creator of the Mother Box and leader of the rebellion against Darkseid on Apokolips. She was presented as a possible romantic interest for Orion, but wasn't used all that often. When writer Alan Burnett, co-writer of Gods and Monsters no less, took over Superman Batman in the early 2000s, he reintroduced Bekka as the lonely wife of Orion. She worked with Batman to free Superman from Darkseid. Like all gods, she had a gift, the power of obsession, which manifested itself through feelings of love and desire. It wasn't something that she could control though, and she and Batman had a brief but intense affair before she returned to Orion. During DC's New 52 era, Bekka was reintroduced as part of New Genesis's Council of Eight, tasked with tracking down the emotional spectrum rings and combining them to forge the life equation. Bekka was most closely associated with Sinestro's Yellow Lanterns, and even got her own yellow ring. I can't say that I was the biggest fan of this era of the comics though, partly because they presented the characters of New Genesis as being just as vicious as the hordes of Apokolips. That theme worked fairly well with Orion as he struggled against his base nature. But to make all the gods of New Genesis ruthless killers diminished them in my eyes. This became their new status quo, replacing everything that had come before it, and it didn't really sit well with me. Fortunately, it has since been retconned. Hearing that, you may wonder why I like the Gods and Monsters universe, considering they did something very similar with their new gods. The simple answer is that this is a separate universe. It doesn't replace what has come before. If anything, it enhances the myth because this Wonder Woman isn't Diana at all, but Bekka, a different woman with a different history, showing how the same mantle can embody hope in one world and horror in another. In the Gods and Monsters universe, Bekka is a warrior forged by betrayal, loss and regret. She had been a pawn in the never-ending war between Apokolips and New Genesis, where in the mainline universe a peace treaty was reached through the exchange of sons. Here, peace is brokered through marriage. Bekka is the granddaughter of Highfather of New Genesis, and she had been promised to Darkseid's son Orion. And the surprising thing is that while the mainline pact felt more like a way for Darkseid to bide his time before resuming the war, here it seems like a genuine attempt at peace. What's more, Orion is not the savage brute that her grandfather presents the Apocalyptians as. In fact, there was more to Apokolips than its expansive fire pits and ghettos. Take the beautiful fields of crystals, where Orion goes to think and be at peace. Bekka genuinely cares for Orion and welcomes the marriage, but at the wedding, her world shatters. The gods of New Genesis slaughter the Apokolips delegation, including Orion, despite promising his safety. They took a sacred ceremony, something intended to unite two warring worlds, and turned it into a massacre. And Bekka is trapped in the midst of it, powerless, forced to watch death unfold before her very eyes. She was aware of the plan, of course, but her grandfather had promised to spare Orion. When Orion tried to defend his family, Highfather killed him without hesitation. This is a complete flip on the mainline new gods who always strive for peace and use violence as a last resort. Highfather had cast off his warmongering ways and pledged to find another way. But here, he's as wicked and deceitful as Darkseid ever was. This event scars her morally and emotionally, forcing her to confront the cost of power and loyalty. And this trauma reveals Bekka's anti-authority streak. She learns that even the most sacred promises can be broken, that hierarchies, even those claiming moral superiority, can murder with impunity. Her moral framework becomes situational and pragmatic. She acts when she can meaningfully prevent harm, but she no longer trusts rules or institutions. This is a Wonder Woman who trusts very few people, mourns deeply, and acts decisively. Rather than remaining with her family, Bekka took her wedding gift from Orion, a sword with a mother box in the hilt, and fled through a boom tube. When Bekka eventually arrived on Earth in the 1960s, she joined the hippie movement, embracing anti-authoritarian ideals. She rejected their psychedelics though, teaching instead how to find transcendence through crystals. It was her attempt to build community on her own terms, free of the hierarchies that betrayed her. This period is a way for her to live ethically without submitting to oppressive structures. Even among humans, Bekka gravitates to freedom, experimentation, and rebellion, although this peaceful existence didn't last long, as revealed in the tie-in comics. By the time of the film, Bekka carries this psychological and emotional weight into her interactions with Batman and Superman. She's passionate, fiercely loyal to them, but also cautious, measured, and sometimes ruthless. She presents herself as a cool and calm fighter, someone without fear. But there's a revealing scene midway through the film when her origin is revealed. Steve Trevor, her sometimes lover, sometimes punching bag, mentions her past and she lashes out, striking him and pointing her sword at his throat. She refers to her feelings about Orion's murder as a moment of weakness. For Bekka, opening up about Orion's death is not cathartic, it's a failure, and she uses her anger to mask her despair. She's been living behind a mask of strength, sexuality, and control. To admit grief and to let someone else see her wounds is unacceptable. By calling it a moment of weakness, she reframes her honesty as a lapse in judgment, not a natural human need. The shame in that phrase suggests she regrets letting Steve Trevor see beneath her armour. Every time she trusted an authority or intimacy, her wedding, her family, or even Orion himself, it ended in horror and betrayal. By reducing Orion's memory to a lapse in judgment, she isn't just diminishing him, she's trying to stamp out her own feelings. The way she acts makes it obvious that she's still in a lot of pain. She doesn't want to talk about him because talking makes him real again. The love, the betrayal, and the massacre. Denial is easier and safer. She calls it weakness because, for her, remembering hurts more than forgetting. The massacre at her wedding left Bekka emotionally scarred. This was not just the loss of a partner, but the violent ripping away of trust, safety, and purpose. In the wake of that, genuine intimacy becomes dangerous. It carries the risk of loss, betrayal, and unbearable pain. Bekka leans into physical desire and sexuality as a distraction from grief and guilt. By focusing on pleasure and passion, she can silence, even if only briefly, the echoes of her trauma. She wields her sexuality like a shield. If her body is occupied, her mind doesn't have to face the ghosts. It also gives her a measure of control. In a world where power structures betrayed her, where she felt powerless to stop the slaughter, intimacy becomes a place where she can set the terms. She can project confidence, allure, and dominance in an attempt to hide her vulnerable, wounded self. Bekka's response is deeply human and, I should add, not exclusively feminine. What makes it poignant in her case is that she's a superhuman woman presented as Wonder Woman stand-in, a character normally defined by compassion, truth, and openness. Seeing her use sexuality as a shield exposes the gap between her heroic exterior and her haunted interior, which is where the horror lives. But I should add that not every lesson she learned from her wedding was negative. She was appalled by her family's actions, and it hardened her resolve to be better. With those she trusts, she strives for honesty, even when it hurts. When the army comes to kill Superman, she stands by his side and vows to fight to the death in his defense. She knows that they are innocent of the crimes they are accused of committing, and she will not stand by idly, even though she has to fight against Steve Trevor. By the film's end, Bekka has helped to save the world from destruction. She saw firsthand how Will Magnus had been consumed by his own pain and loss, and she realised that she could not continue the way she had been. You cannot resolve your trauma by hiding from it, or by trying to bend the world to it. It was time for her to face her fears and return to New Genesis. Bekka's story was never continued, and what happened next remains a mystery. Bekka is fascinating because she reframes Wonder Woman through the lens of horror. The mainline Diana is defined by truth, compassion, and hope. She believes in the possibility of peace, even in a world that constantly wages war. Bekka, by contrast, is defined by betrayal, survival, and the lingering ache of grief. She doesn't wear the armour of ideals, she wears armour to keep her scars concealed. And yet, both women reveal something essential about us. Diana embodies who we want to be, our better angels, unshaken in the face of cruelty. Bekka, meanwhile, embodies who we often are. scarred, mistrustful, longing for connection but terrified of what it might cost. Her use of intimacy as a shield, her suspicion of authority, and her refusal to name her grief as anything but weakness aren't flaws, they're marks of a survivor. And in a world that feels increasingly uncertain, Bekka's humanity hits close to home. That's why this version of Wonder Woman speaks to me. She reminds us that even heroes can be haunted, even gods can bleed, and even icons can be broken and betrayed. In the end, Bekka's story is unfinished and her fate unknown, but perhaps that's fitting. She lingers as a ghost in the myth of Wonder Woman, a reminder of how thin the line between god and monster can be, and in that sense Bekka may be the most terrifyingly human Wonder Woman of them all. Okay, that's it for this week's essay. If you liked the video, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, leave a comment, tell all your friends about me. You know how YouTube works. If you really enjoyed the video and have the means, please consider making use of the thanks button to send a buck or two my way, because every little helps. I offer channel memberships for $1.99 a month. This will get you early access to my weekly video essay, priority responses to your comments, members-only videos, custom emojis, and an icon on your profile indicating that you're one of my people. And special thanks to my channel members. Everyone who was a member at the time of this video's creation is listed on the screen right now. If you want to see your name amongst all these wonderful people, join the channel now. Next time. I'll be back on Friday when it'll be time to revisit another misunderstood monster from Batman the Animated Series, Professor Dorian's genetically engineered ultimate life form, Tigress. And then next Monday I'll be sticking with the Gods and Monsters universe to talk about their Man of Steel, Hernan Guerra, the son of General Zod. Hope to see you then.